right, welcome back to Musicians Edition. Today we're going to look at the parts of the drum set. All right, so the first and most important thing is the throne, right? And you can see here, I have a nice comfy throne because I like to be comfortable when I'm playing the drum set. Yours might look something a little more like this, right? Which is kind of the standard throne that comes with a lot of drum sets. These are totally fine too. If you're going to be playing for a long time, these are a nice investment to make for the comfort of your back if you're going to be sitting there for an extended period of time. All right, and there's really not much of a reason that you can't just use a good old-fashioned chair either. Although these tend to be, just a little more helpful in terms of adjusting the height and being able to kind of sit the way you need to play the drums. But if all else fails, you can just use a chair. Okay, so coming right around here, you can see that I have all of my drums kind of muffled, and that is because I have neighbors and family, and so I want to keep them happy while I'm playing the drums. So I try to keep everything kind of muffled so that when I'm practicing, other people aren't getting completely fed up with me. Okay, so the first instrument we're going to see here is just our snare drum, right? And we talked about these in our intro to snare drum video, right? So you can check that out for more information there. But the kind of the centerpiece of our drum set is the snare drum, right? Another drum that's very similar to a snare drum is a tom, okay? So toms are just a drum sit very similar to a snare drum, just that they don't have snares on the bottom, right? So when we play a snare drum, we hear that kind of snare sound, right? When we play a tom, we don't get that, okay? So this is typically, we would refer to this as like a high tom. Some people might call it a rack tom, that sort of thing, okay? Over here we have another tom, right? This is just a bigger one. And, that can be called a low tom. Some people call it a floor tom, right? There's kind of different terms that are used for it, but they all mean the same thing, right? It's just the larger one, okay? And you'll see on different drum sets there are different numbers of toms, right? Some drum sets have a whole bunch, some have very few. Typically what happens is the more you have to travel or the more of a hurry you are in setting up your drums, then the fewer toms you have because it means less trips to the car and less stuff to put together, okay? So those are toms, and this is the snare drum, okay? Moving along here to the cymbals in our drum set, right? This first one here is what we call hi-hats, right? And we call them hi-hats because there are multiple cymbals there, right? You'll hear it called a hi-hat, which is fine, it's whatever. But there are two cymbals here, right? So you can see one cymbal there and the top cymbal here. Again, this is just a mute so that I can practice without being loud, okay? What we have on this hi-hat as well is what we call a clutch, right? Or this little thing that we can turn here, right? Because this runs off of a pedal, right? So when I push this pedal, it moves this metal rod up and down, okay? And if I twist this, if I tighten this wing nut here to the point that it clamps against this rod and holds this whole thing to the rod, then when I move the pedal, it moves the top cymbal up and down, right? And so then the hi-hat gives you a lot of flexibility sound-wise because you can play it with your foot, you can play it with a stick, right? You can play it with your foot down, which is going to keep the cymbals pressed tightly together, or you can play it with your foot up, which is going to let the cymbals kind of sizzle against each other a little bit, right? And there's every option in between, right? You can play it with a little bit open, you can play it all the way open, all the way closed. So super cool. That is the hi-hat. Okay. The other cymbal that you'll see on a drum set is what we call a ride cymbal, right? And a lot of times this is kind of a larger cymbal, and it's usually set up over here so that you can play it so that right-handed drummers can play it with their right hand, okay? When we play the hi-hat, and we'll talk about this later, or in later videos as well, but we typically cross our right hand over and play the hi-hat with our right hand, and then when we play the ride cymbal, we move our right hand over to the right cymbal, okay? Very good. You will also sometimes, again, depending on the drum set, you'll see multiple cymbals, right? Crash cymbals, splash cymbals, things like that, and those are all well and good. Again, it kind of depends on what style of music you're playing or what kind of situation you're in. Some people like to play with just one cymbal. Some people like to have a whole bunch of cymbals. It just kind of depends on your preference and your budget and your willingness to haul cymbals around and how often you have to travel with your drum set, okay? All right, the last piece of the drum set is that we're going to talk about today is the bass drum, okay? So this is just a big drum, again, built similarly to a snare drum or to a tom, it's just bigger in size, okay? Again, I have a practice pad attached here, but you can see inside there's just a normal drum head that this beater would be hitting if I didn't have this practice pad on it right now, okay? So the bass drum is played with a pedal, right? We typically put our right foot on the bass drum pedal and our left foot on the hi-hat pedal. This just operates off of a spring, right? And when we push this down, it pulls this chain, which then tips this forward and puts tension on the spring and lets the beater hit the head, right? And then when we let our foot up, it lets the beater back off of the head, okay? Simple as that. So that's the bass drum. All right, so just to recap really quickly, we have the bass drum, we have the ride cymbal, and an assortment of other cymbals depending on the situation. All right, we have the hi-hats, right? The hi-hat cymbals with the pedal. Okay, we have toms, right? These drums up here. Remember, don't have any snares. We have, we can call them a high tom or in a low tom, or some people say a rack tom and a floor tom, or whatever. Just different varieties of toms, right? And then the centerpiece of our drum set, which is the snare drum, and of course the most important thing, which is our throne. All right, so those are the parts of the drum set. I'll see you next time.